My name is Amanda. I'm 38 years old. And 18 months ago, my entire life cracked open over a single piece of paper. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't suspicious. I was just a wife who trusted her husband completely. Nathan and I had been married 11 years. We had a home, a routine, a life that felt solid. Then I found a property deed with Nathan's name on it, signed, notarized, for a house in a city he had never once mentioned. A city he swore, hand on his heart, he had never visited. My hands were shaking, because the signature looked almost right. Almost, but not quite. And that tiny difference changed everything. I had a document nobody could explain, and a feeling sitting in my chest that hasn't left me since. Before I tell you what actually happened, like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Now let me take you back to the day it all started. It was a Tuesday morning. Nathan had left for work early. I was clearing out the home office, just organizing, nothing dramatic. We'd been talking about converting it into a guest room. Boxes, old files, the usual clutter. I pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a folder I'd never seen before. Plain. Unlabeled. I almost put it straight into the recycling pile. I didn't. Inside was a single document. A property deed. Dated 4 years ago. A house in Phoenix, Arizona. I had never been to Phoenix. Nathan had never mentioned Phoenix. Not once. Not ever. But his name was right there. Clear as anything. Nathan Ellis. Listed as the registered owner of a property worth $340,000. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. I put it back in the folder. Walked to the kitchen. Stood at the sink and just stared at the wall. Something was wrong. I didn't know what yet. But something was very, very wrong. I didn't say anything to Nathan that night. I made dinner. We watched television. I laughed at the right moments. He had no idea. But the moment he fell asleep, I was back in that office. Folder open. Document flat on the desk under the lamp. I photographed every page. Then I opened my laptop. The property was real. I found it inside 10 minutes. A house on Clearwater Drive, Phoenix, Arizona. Public records confirmed it. Registered under Nathan's full name. Nathan James Ellis. His date of birth. His details. All of it matching perfectly. Except Nathan James Ellis had been sitting on our sofa in Cincinnati every single day for the past 11 years. I searched for any business trip, any conference, any reason he could have been in Arizona 4 years ago. I checked his old emails, the ones still synced to our shared calendar. Nothing. Not a single flight. Not a single hotel. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I did something I never thought I would do. I started going through his phone records. The phone records showed nothing unusual. Same numbers. Same patterns. His office. His brother. Me. A few work contacts he'd mentioned before. No Arizona area codes. No unknown numbers. Nothing that screamed secret. I put the phone down and just sat there. Because now I had 2 options sitting in front of me. Either Nathan was lying to my face about everything, or someone had used his name, his full legal name, his date of birth, his identity, to purchase a property he knew absolutely nothing about. Both possibilities made my stomach turn. I went back to the deed. I looked at the signature again. I'd seen Nathan's signature thousands of times. On cards, contracts, forms. I knew exactly how he wrote the N. The sharp angle. The way it dropped at the end. This was close. But it wasn't him. The next morning I called in sick to work. I drove straight to a notary office 3 towns over. I didn't want anyone local involved. Not yet. I walked in and placed the document on the counter. I said, I need to know if this signature is legally valid. The woman looked at it. Then she looked at me. She picked up the phone. She called her supervisor. They spoke quietly in the back office. I stood at that counter for 11 minutes. I counted every single one. When she came back, her expression had changed. She slid the document toward me carefully. Like it was evidence. Because it was. She said the notary seal on the deed was registered to a firm in Phoenix that had been shut down 2 years ago. Investigated for fraudulent filings. Multiple cases. The seal had been replicated. Used on at least a dozen documents that were currently under review. My mouth went dry. I drove home. I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. That evening I told Nathan. I put the document on the kitchen table between us. I watched his face. 11 years of marriage, and I was sitting there studying my own husband like a stranger. He went pale. He picked it up. Read it slowly. Set it down. He said, Amanda. I have never been to Phoenix in my life. I know, I said. That was the moment it stopped being about us. Someone outside our marriage had reached in and grabbed Nathan's identity. Used it. Filed it. Walked away clean. And we had no idea who. We hired a lawyer the following week. A real estate attorney named Patricia Voss. She'd handled fraud cases before. She wasn't warm. She wasn't reassuring. But she was sharp, and that was what we needed. She pulled the full title history on the Phoenix property within 48 hours. What she found stopped us cold. The property had been purchased using Nathan's identity, then immediately remortgaged. $210,000 pulled out against it. Then 6 months later sold. Quietly. Quickly. To a shell company with no traceable directors. Someone had used Nathan's name to borrow over $200,000. Then vanished. Patricia laid it out flat on her desk. She said this is deed fraud. It's more common than people think. It's more organized than people imagine. And the people who do it are rarely caught quickly. I looked at Nathan. He looked at me. 11 years of building something together. A credit history. A clean name. A reputation. And someone had reached into all of that and helped themselves. Patricia said we needed to move fast. Every day we waited, the paper trail got colder. She picked up her pen. She said, let's start at the beginning. Who has access to Nathan's personal documents? I opened my mouth, then closed it, because one name had just come into my head. 3 years ago we had a break-in. Nothing major. Or so we thought. A back window. A few things moved around. Nathan's home office disturbed. We filed a police report. The officer said it looked like someone got spooked and left empty-handed. We believed that. We shouldn't have. Because sitting in Patricia's office, I suddenly remembered something I had completely forgotten. Nathan's filing cabinet had been left open. We assumed we'd left it unlocked ourselves. We didn't check what was inside. We didn't inventory anything. His passport. His social security card. His birth certificate. All kept in that cabinet. All still there when we checked. So we never thought twice about it. But you don't need to take documents. You just need 10 minutes alone with them. A phone camera. Steady hands. And absolutely no conscience. I told Patricia everything. The break-in. The cabinet. The timeline. She cross-referenced the date of the break-in against the date on the deed. For months apart. She sat back in her chair and looked at us. She said, whoever did this planned it. This wasn't opportunistic. They came to your house specifically. They knew what they were looking for before they arrived. The room went very quiet. Nathan reached across and took my hand. I didn't pull away. But my mind was already somewhere else entirely. Patricia gave us homework. Write down every person who had been inside our home in the 12 months before the break-in. Friends. Family. Contractors. Anyone. I sat at the kitchen table that night with a notepad. Nathan sat across from me. We went through it together. Plumber in January. My sister and her husband at Easter. Nathan's colleague Marcus for a barbecue in June. The couple from next door twice. A cleaning company we used for 3 months then canceled. I wrote every name down. Then Nathan said, what about Derek? I stopped writing. Derek Holloway. Nathan's childhood friend. They'd grown up together. Stayed close into adulthood. Derek had stayed with us for 5 days the previous summer while his apartment was being renovated. He'd slept in the guest room, right next to Nathan's office. I looked at Nathan. He was already shaking his head. Already defending him before I'd said a single word. He said, Derek wouldn't do that. We've known him 20 years. I didn't argue. I just wrote the name down. Because I remembered something else. Derek had gone through a rough patch financially around that time. Lost his job. Behind on payments. He'd asked Nathan for a loan. Nathan had said no. I didn't bring Derek's name to Patricia straight away. I needed to be sure. Or at least surer than I was. So I did something Nathan doesn't know about to this day. I found Derek on social media. 3 years of posts. I went through all of it. Slowly. Methodically. Looking for anything that didn't fit. And then I found it. 8 months after our break-in, Derek had moved. New apartment. Nice building. The kind with a concierge and underground parking. He'd posted photos. Proud of himself. Fresh start, new chapter, all of it. But Derek had been unemployed. Behind on everything. Nathan had turned down his loan request. So where did the money come from? I screenshotted everything. Dates. Posts. Location tags. Then I cross-referenced his move date against the timeline Patricia had already built. It lined up. I called Patricia without telling Nathan. I sent her everything I had. She was quiet for a long moment after I finished talking. Then she said, "Amanda, this isn't proof. But it's enough to hand to the investigators and let them pull the thread." She made a call that afternoon. By the following morning, Derek Holloway had a name on a case file. And Nathan still thought he was his oldest friend. Telling Nathan was the hardest conversation of our marriage. Not the deed. Not the fraud. Not the lawyer's office or the police report. This. Sitting across from him at our kitchen table and saying, "I think Derek did this to you." He didn't shout. That almost made it worse. He just sat there. Very still. Looking at the table. Then he said, "How long have you known?" I told him everything. The social media search. The timeline. The call to Patricia. All of it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the back garden, and stayed out there for nearly an hour. I watched him through the kitchen window. Didn't follow him. He needed that hour. When he came back inside, his face had closed over completely. He said, "What do we do now?" I slid Patricia's contact sheet across the table. Investigators were already involved. The shell company tied to the Phoenix property was being traced. Derek's financials had been flagged for review. But the legal process to clear Nathan's name was only just beginning. Credit agencies notified. Affidavits filed. A court application to have the deed formally voided. Months of work. Thousands in legal fees. All because someone Nathan trusted had sat at our dinner table and smiled. The investigators confirmed it 4 months later. Derek Holloway had photographed Nathan's documents during those 5 days he stayed with us. Social security card. Passport. Birth certificate. He had everything he needed before he even left our guest room. He never broke in. He'd been invited in. The so-called break-in 3 years ago was staged. Derek came back for something he'd missed the first time. A secondary document Patricia's team identified later in the filing chain. He was charged. Fraud. Identity theft. Obtaining mortgage finance by deception. Nathan sat in our living room the evening we got the call and said nothing for a very long time. 20 years of friendship. School. Holidays. Standing at our wedding. All of it recalculated in an instant. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing either. I just sat next to him. Close enough that our shoulders were touching. The legal vindication came eventually. Nathan's name was formally removed from the Phoenix deed. The fraud markers were cleared from his credit file. On paper, it was resolved. But something had shifted between us that didn't shift back. Not because of anything Nathan did. Not because of anything I did. Because we now knew exactly how quietly a life could be taken apart. And how little warning you get. I want to stop here for a moment. Because what happened to us can happen to anyone watching this right now. I mean that. You do not have to be careless. You do not have to be naive. You do not have to do a single thing wrong. All it takes is one person with access to your documents and absolutely no loyalty to you. Deed fraud is not rare. It is not complicated to execute. And most victims discover it the exact same way I did. By accident. Long after the damage is done. Here is what I wish someone had told me before any of this happened. Go to your county recorder's website right now. Search your name. Search your partner's name. Your property should appear. If anything else appears, anything you do not recognize, you need to make a call today. Sign up for title monitoring. Most counties offer it free. It alerts you the moment any document is filed using your property details. Lock your credit. All 3 bureaus. It takes 20 minutes and it costs nothing. Nathan's identity was used to pull over $200,000 because his credit was open and clean. And be careful who you invite into your home. Not paranoid. Just careful. Because we were trusting. And someone made a career out of that. Nathan and I are still together. I want to say that clearly because I know some of you are wondering. We made it through. But I will not pretend it was clean or easy, or that we just dusted ourselves off and moved on. It wasn't like that. There were months where the tension between us sat like something physical in every room. Not anger at each other. Just the weight of it. The violation. The helplessness. The way trust, even trust between 2 people who love each other, gets contaminated when the world proves it can reach in without permission. Derek pleaded guilty. He received a sentence that Nathan said felt too light. I didn't disagree. But here's the thing I think about most now. I found that deed by accident. A random Tuesday. A drawer I nearly didn't open. If I had put that folder straight into the recycling pile, none of this would have surfaced. Nathan's name would still be sitting on that Phoenix property. The debt still attached to it. Growing quietly in the background of our lives. That thought keeps me sharp. So if this story did anything for you today, go and check. Right now. Before this video ends. Search your name. Protect your title. Lock your credit. Because nobody is coming to warn you. I only found out by chance. You might not be that lucky.